When they know that they can reach out to your president or your vice president and have an immediate conversation or ask them for whatever it is that they need, it instills a sense of comfort.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. And on this show, we share ideas and insights from construction leaders across the country every single week to help you lead more effectively. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Miss Crystal Pieschel. She's the Director of Marketing at Mid-Cape Home Centers, a division of US LBM, which are located, that's right, on the Cape. Which Cape? The only Cape. Cape Cod, that is. Now, as you will hear, Crystal is very passionate and intelligent about sales and marketing, and she's going to share several tips in general that will affect every single listener on how you can build stronger relationships in our business. We also talk about engaging with the community and how to do that effectively, and also how to nearly double your marketing budget with funds that are currently available by utilizing co-op dollars more effectively. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Miss Crystal Pieschel, Director of Marketing at Mid-Cape Home Centers. As always, thank you for listening. Miss Crystal Pieschel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bradley. Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited you made time for this. We've been talking about this for a while, and so I'm thrilled you're here. Good to see you. Let's start in the Wayback Machine. Take me back to where you were when you were, say, 12 years old, roughly sixth grade. And do you remember what, in your 12-year-old self, what you thought you might be doing circa 2023?
Yes. I wanted to live in San Diego and be a marine biologist or a dolphin trainer.
Very specific. By the way, it took me a lot longer than 12 years old, like in my early to mid 20s, to realize San Diego is a pretty awesome place to be. So you wanted to be a marine biologist, okay? Just like George Costanza from Seinfeld.
George is a marine biologist?
Yeah, pretty damn good one, too.
I can't believe it. I would never have thought.
Yeah, he's specializing in whales. He's working on lowering the cholesterol level in whales. All that blubber. It's quite unhealthy. You know, it's the largest mammal on Earth, but as George says, they don't have to be.
I did it for you.
I don't know what you had to tell her that for. You put me in a very difficult position, marine biologist. I'm very uncomfortable with this whole thing.
Yeah, with all due respect, I would think it's right up your alley.
Well, it's not up my alley. It's one thing if I make it up. I know what I'm doing. I know my alleys. You got me in the Galapagos Islands living with the turtles. I don't know where the hell I am.
Well, you came in the other day with all that whale stuff, the squeaking and the squealing and...
Look, why couldn't you make me an architect? You know I always wanted to pretend that I was an architect.
What stimulated that? Did you have any sort of experience where you're like, that's what I want to do?
I mean, honestly, it was more just going to SeaWorld as a kid, and dolphins were my favorite animals. I had dolphins, all over my room, everywhere. So it was mostly for a love of dolphins.
Did you ever play the Sega game Echo the Dolphin?
I don't think so. No.
It was a weird game. It was when Sega broke on the scene. Now, granted, you're almost a decade younger than I am. But anyway, there's this weird game where you were a dolphin. It was kind of bizarre, but also very addictive. Anyway, sidecar. You can go.
I'll try that on my free time.
There you go. Add it to your list because I know you're looking for things to do in your free time. Echo the Dolphin. Sure. Now, like myself, you had a father who was in the industry. You were in the Midwest. I have some questions to kind of ask you just about a lot of the work that you did prior to coming into the LBM industry. When did this, even the LBM industry, when did that even come on your radar as like, that's a thing? People do this with lumber to help people build. When did that come on your radar?
It's been on my radar since I was a very young child. My dad, he would bring home his lumber reports and random links charts and all those things.
Yep.
And I remember he would highlight them. And back then they were like the green and white sheets of paper, and they'd go, back and forth. So I just remember watching him do that, thinking, why are you, what's the point? Like, what are you doing? And he would get so into it and have to focus on it. And it was a very common thing for him to bring those home. And I would also go to my dad's office with him on take your daughter to work day. Or I remember times when my mom and I would go meet him for lunch, and we'd meet all the people in the office that we'd hear him talk about at home. And he was very involved in his work, and he brought his family to the work a lot. So that's how I became familiar with it. And then it wasn't until way later in my career, though, that I have come back around to be a part of it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about like those old, and there's a name for it, it's not coming to me, the old printers that were all the clackety printers, and they would fold out and those long reams of paper would come out, and then they would kind of like accordion style fold, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And the sides were like holes in the
Yes.
along the sides.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. There's a name for it. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it now. But the exact same experience. My dad would come home, and it was relatively infrequently, but a couple of times a year. My guess would be the year end or a quarter end. And he would sit at our dining room table, which he never really would, to work and go through that. And I just remember being like, whatever businesses, it's happening right here. And same thing, he would take us into, he worked for Siegel's Home and Building Centers. And we would go kind of on the weekends if he had to go in, and we would tag along. And yeah, that was a trip. So Crystal, you interned at GE. You got involved in sales, and you worked for 8 years at a company called Market Awareness. Maybe tell me, what are some of the insights or lessons you learned there that you were able to ultimately bring to Midcape?
I would say that I learned a lot on the sales side when I was working for Market Awareness, and because I was doing sales and business development activities.
Okay.
So I learned the cold calling, the prospecting, being persistent, not getting discouraged, because back then it was a lot of cold calling, like on the phone actually. And that is not a fun thing to do, but I did it, and I made it work. It was a newer company too, so we would generate all of our own leads. And then where we started to really grow was when we would get involved in the local organizations and chapters and do more networking type of activities. So it was a really fun opportunity, and I took on a lot of different roles there.
Got it. And I don't want to bury the lead here. What was the main deliverable, or who was the main customer base being served when you were at Market Awareness?
It was businesses. It was B2B, and it was really across all industries. What we did was we helped companies understand their perceived strengths and weaknesses as according to their customers and their prospects. So what's your win-loss ratio? Why? And then we'd go and interview the companies. Why did you not select company X? What did you like about them? What didn't you like about them? And we'd provide deliverables on that data back to our clients.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine that skill and, the mental models that go with understanding that there's perceptions of you as an individual and your company that are in the market. And sometimes they are really perfectly aligned with how you see the world. In other cases, they're completely out of balance. And I think having kind of a third party, and maybe that's an informal, colleague who's in the industry, or obviously a consultant or a firm like Market Awareness, of someone who can measure this and help you think through that. As you know, all too often it's, we have this and we have this and we do this. And you go talk to the customers and they're like, I don't know, they're pretty good, but they're just like everybody else. And they're like, what? We're killing ourselves doing all the stuff. Yet this perception is very different. So that's fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about, and you can tell me if I'm pronouncing this correctly, SCIP, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So strategic and competitive intelligence professionals. I would like to be all those things. I want to be strategic. I want to be competitive. I want to have some level of intelligence, and I want to be a professional. So tell me about that. What did you do in that? And you did that while you were working for Market Awareness, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We joined that when I moved to Austin, Texas, as part of market awareness. And that's actually when we were getting involved in the more like the local events and the networking. It was a competitive intelligence industry that we worked in because that's the kind of information we were getting.
Got it.
So there was no local chapter around us in Texas. We actually launched the Austin, Texas chapter. And so I was the chair of that. And what we would do is we'd bring in speakers and host events and just really got the chapter off the ground running, well, subliminally, promoting our services.
Yes, of course. Okay. Well, that provides a ton of, I think, important background of all the things that you were able to bring and then enter the industry. And what I really wanted to talk to you about was a couple of things, but I think I would probably start with when I heard you speaking and kind of in the prep for this, you kind of referred to kind of relationship marketing. And when we talk about our business in the construction industry, it doesn't take long for someone to say, you got to keep in mind, this is a relationship business. And you're like, okay, yes. What does that really mean? And as you were talking, let's really dig into that. Who is the relationship with? Is it with the outside sales rep? Is it with the local branch? If you have multiple branches, is it with the brand? And I think you guys are thinking about that. And this is just my opinion, but working all over the country and understanding what Mid-Cape does, I think you guys are thinking about this in a different way. And I think from a tactical standpoint, you are doing things really specifically to expand kind of the reach of your relationship business. So maybe tell me a little bit about that. How do you go about doing that to really say, listen, we're a business. There's a lot of people working really hard on our side, same thing on your side. And we don't want this to be just two individuals that have that kind of transactional or that simple relationship versus really as two organizations who can really help each other. How do you end up doing that?
There's a lot of steps that have gotten us here, I think. One of them obviously is it starts at the top, where that is the approach that our leadership, our president has, is it's a people business. He's kind of brought that mentality to us where relationships can go a really long way. Things are going to happen. It's not always going to be a perfect delivery, a perfect, whatever, there's problems happen in the industry. So if you have a relationship with the customer, and if it's a deep relationship, meaning multiple people within your company have that relationship, if something happens, they can call you and you'll work through it together. You'll come to a solution and you'll find a way to better service them, which is ultimately what they want. If you don't have that, if your salesperson does something to piss them off, it's so easy. It's an easy decision for them to just leave and go try the competitor.
Yeah.
But have the different layers of people to talk through it with and improve upon it, it really makes a big difference.
Have you ever had the situation where theoretically you have an outside salesperson, their compensation is based on maintaining that relationship and building it? And sometimes salespeople, they want to guard that relationship and they want to view this, listen, the relationship isn't with the company. It's with me and I'm the guy. And because this is an extremely common issue, I don't want to, you'll tell me some sort of context with Mid-Cape, and it's often there, we'll have leadership kind of feel somewhat beholden and we'll have this almost internal fighting where you have a salesperson, I'm defending this relationship and I don't want anybody else talking to them because they feel it's a sense of control. I think part of that is human nature, but based on what you shared with me, I think part of this is what's the culture? What are the behaviors? How do we intend to do business from the top down? So how do you avoid that? Or has that ever come up in the past? And how do you make sure that we say at the end of the day, we're a whole team and we want to help our account, our customer the best we can?
Yeah, definitely. When I first started at Mid-Cape 6.5 years ago, we didn't do a lot on the side of tying marketing to sales. So when I started, we would, we're going to host this event. It's a builder event, let's say a holiday party. Can you invite each of you invite your top 10 customers to this? They're going to love it. It's a great opportunity for us to do some relationship building. A lot of them would come back and say, oh, no one wants to come. It's not, no, they're not the right people or they're busy, whatever. So After a couple of years, though, honestly, of showing them the value, and when they would get customers to come, how much rave reviews they would get, the experience that we're able to give them, it really would help prove then to the OSR that all we're doing is trying to help you. And then I think once they started to see that, now it's more of a natural thing. But it did take a couple of years of proving that we're not, no one's trying to take this account from you. You can still be the primary. You can take all the orders. We just want to support it and help grow it. So proof of it is really all it took.
Yeah, just this past week, I was listening. This has been an ongoing issue, but listening to a certain client, and what they're trying to do is they really invest a lot in their newsletter, where they're trying to pull different insights. They're not pitching products. They're not talking about sales. They're talking about business insights that are really designed for their customers. And they're doing that with the newsletter. And they would ask the salesperson, like, hey, do you have any of these new accounts that you brought on? Can we get their email so we can add them to the newsletter list? And the guy's like, yeah, they're not newsletter people.
Yeah.
And, and then, the VP of sales says, like, what does that mean? And like, yeah, they don't, he said, they don't read stuff on the internet. And I was like, oh, and somebody else jumped in and they kind of really challenged him. But there's this mindset, these aren't the people that come to this sort of thing, right? And because then sometimes it looks like more work. Knowing what you know now, I guarantee you, many, because we have clients who are listening to this episode for sure, are going to say, this is exactly what we're dealing with right now. Knowing what you know now, would you have any advice to speed maybe that learning curve or increase the influence or persuasion of leadership to get people bought into that sooner? Because this is a very common conflict that you described.
Yeah, probably would be to pick the least threatening person that can help. So whether that be a specialty sales, a kitchen designer,
Yeah,
or millwork sales, or just the person that they work well with internally and don't view as a threat, get them working together more and let them start to see how much that helps. And then just get them used to sharing the line of communication with the customer.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And I think it's an insight to the obvious, but really being thoughtful about who the messenger is. And I think often you look at teams and you'll say, oh, Jim and Sarah work really well together. All right, well, is that a possible easy entryway? And to get Sarah involved in here where you can expand it. And I think sometimes it's, we'll have companies and teams that fight with each other for years. And then they're like, oh, you know who's awesome? Sarah. And she just helped me make more money because she just sold 3 kitchens. And I should have done this years ago. And you're like, I know, we were trying to convince you years ago. And that I think kind of goes to human nature and change management and how we do that. But so I think that's really smart. Before I jump to community engagement, which I'm excited to talk to you about because you guys are doing a number of different things there. Is there anything else that would fall under kind of relationship management or relationship marketing that before we move on, you would say, this is just another really important principle that you act upon or you keep top of mind as you're thinking about marketing at Midcape?
Have a direct line of communication for your customers all the way to the top of your company. Because when they know, and I kind of said this earlier, but when they know that they can reach out to your president or your vice president and have an immediate conversation or ask them for whatever it is that they need, it instills a sense of comfort and it helps just continue to develop both companies' relationships. And then from there, when other people in the company can see that your leadership team is very invested in this customer, the others then know that's an important customer that we should all pay attention to. So really just have it start at the top.
Does that message directly from the top to a customer, is that, in your experience, best sent at like these events when we are face-to-face? Or can that also be done through phone calls or emails where you're saying, hey, leadership, now would be a good time to go and call this customer? Or how does that work on kind of a more day-to-day level?
I think it's about creating as many opportunities as possible for your team to get to know their team so that it organically happens without feeling forced.
I think I love that. And I think in my simple mind, I can only come up with sports analogies, but it's just getting more at bats. It's creating more opportunities for us to be together. And that way you don't have the situation where we have a crisis and now we all have to go meet each other for the first time, even though we've been working together for 3 years. Right.
Yeah.
So I love that. Well, you mentioned the Home Builders Association, just following you guys on Instagram and seeing what you're doing. I believe you are doing some very different things strategically in that community too, I think in a different way, probably on a broader scale, to create more opportunities to engage with the community. And I saw you guys you'll tell me about it, a Home Builders Association award. You did something with veterans. You did a telethon. You did Toys for Tots. There's something with Christmas wishes, helping out locals in the community who have wishes that are going to be unfulfilled. So you guys are doing all these things. So tell me just a little bit about that. When it comes to community engagement, how do you think about that? How do you plan it? And how do you execute it?
It's a key part of our marketing strategy. So even when looking at the budget, we make sure that a portion of the budget is allocated to community support type of activities. Not always just donations. Of course we do donations, we do sponsorships and all of that. But how else can we get involved and get our name out there, but get our name out there while also doing something good so that it's a win-win-win.
So tell me a little bit about how you get involved with the Home Builders Association, because I think for some folks, it falls into the category of, we pay our dues and we go to a couple things, but there's nothing really strategic or in terms of ROI that we get from that. And my question is, are you involved because you think that's what you should do and it's a couple grand a year and you do it? Or is it part of a strategy? And are you all in? And are you truly there to put time and energy, attention, and capital? And I think multiple times when it comes up, like, you guys are very involved in that. So tell me how you got involved and how do you think about your engagement with your local Home Builders Association?
Our president, again, got us really involved because he's on the board for the Home Builders Association. When I came on board, we wouldn't really attend from a marketing perspective, but I had also just relocated across country to Cape Cod and I didn't know anybody. So I started attending the monthly dinner meetings to learn, but also as a part of my job and to socialize as well and to meet people. And you really start to meet so many people and then you can develop business relationships out of that. So me not being a salesperson directly, I'll meet a customer from company, or I'll meet a person from company XYZ. We're not doing business with them. We'll hit it off. We'll see each other at the meetings every month. Hey, have you ever talked to anyone at Mid-Cape about trying us out? And it's just a friendly way to get them to consider us and then start doing business with us. So that's how we approach home builders. Yeah,
I think that's smart in that, and that's kind of been mine, is everybody is wary, like, even for people who are sales professionals, it's like, oh, I'm at this event. Is somebody going to try to sell me something? Is it going to be awkward? And if you're just there and you're like, hey, we're both in the same industry. I'm curious about you. What do you do? Is there any way I can help you just as a human being? And then what happens is, on a long enough timeline, I've had this where we've worked alongside folks for, a year or two. And then they're finally like, Hartman, I meant to ask you, what the hell do you really do? But on a long enough timeline, they're going to say, what do you do? And then, hey, is there any way that we could work together? But if you force that up front, you will limit the socializing. You will limit that relationship from happening because you're putting business in front of being human. So I think that's smart. And that's where my recommendation, my experience has been, it's okay just to say, hey, let's slowly get involved. But at some point, you either got to make the decision, we're going to do this and we're going to do it. We're going to manage our calendar. We're going to create time and we're going to make this a priority instead of just kind of floating along, because then you don't really get the benefits. And then I think you just kind of miss out on those opportunities. And I wanted to ask you, because I saw you were nominated, you're on the board for the Cape Cod Young Professionals. With everything you have going on personally and professionally, How do you think about making time for that? Because this is something I'm currently completely failing at myself.
Well, I think I'm also failing at that, but it's okay because, just always doing the best that you can. Actually, when they approached me about it, I had been very upfront about the fact that I don't have any time. I have 2 young kids. I work a ton as it is. I'm very involved in home builders and all these others associations, but I love CCYP and I like the story. I want to learn more and grow. And that helped me from a guilt perspective. So I won't have that constant they're expecting more out of me because I have been upfront about having a lot on my plate. But another thing is so being involved in the community is part of our marketing strategy. That's part of my job. So in a way, I'm also killing 2 birds with one stone because I'm getting more involved, getting the company more involved, and I'm getting some professional development out of it as well.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great. And I think anytime there's ongoing initiatives or we've identified this is how we're going to be successful to meet our goals next year, or the next 3 years or 5 years, it's always easier to say, all right, am I not deceiving myself? That's important. But if I'm not, does this make sense to do it? Right. And now all of a sudden, this is part of this isn't something extra. It's not outside. This is part of what we're doing. And then I think you're right, being upfront with kind of your expectations and some of your concerns, but also giving yourself a potential off ramp that, hey, I'm going to make a commitment for 2 years. After that, we can reassess. And I think if you do that, most people understand, especially you got a young family and everybody's working hard. So I think that's helpful because that's oftentimes we'll consult with young, talented folks and they're like, I don't want to overcommit. And that would hurt my own reputation. And again, there's a lot of variables in there, but I think the way that you approach it would just be helpful for that.
Yeah. And like I said, too, the social side, because of work and the kids and having moved here, recently, not having a long-term group of friends, that's my only time to socialize is when I go to these evening work events. And I've actually made some really great friends through it. So you can approach it from it's not just work perspective.
Yeah. All right. Before I let you go, I do want to talk about something. We're going to have to thread this needle lightly. There's a little bit of nuance here. There's probably going to be some things you don't want to share. I totally get it. But one of the things that I used to talk to my father about a lot when I was at Pulte Homes and he was working for an LBM dealer, and it came to co-op dollars, and there's money set aside to where we can cross promote, work together. And he would often talk about one of the most overlooked opportunities is really think about how to maximize those dollars in a way that benefit both people. And I can tell you, totally separate podcast, he got extremely creative on how to spend other people's money in a way that they were excited to be part of it. And we were at one point talking about kind of a lengthy article, a couple thousand words of going into all the different things that he did over his career. And some were crazy and you're like, you probably can't do that anymore. That though, you can. So this is one area that you've kind of talked about of really being thoughtful about and understanding that there are dollars there. And I will talk to folks that provide the co-op dollars and they're like, it drives me crazy when we have this money sitting there and they just don't have the organization or a plan to even maximize it. So maybe just tell me a little bit about it. Obviously, you're going to be thoughtful in how you respond, but we're not going to go too deep. But how do you think about those co-op dollars and leveraging those to help everybody kind of achieve what you're trying to do from a marketing and sales standpoint?
I think of the co-op dollars as a great way to double your marketing budget. You can do so much more if your cost on things is only half. So pretty much everything we do when we can is going to have co-op involved. And it can still be your branding too. A lot of times you hear people concerned that when you're using co-op, you have to make it all about the vendor, but that's not true. They have their guidelines. And as long as you stick to those guidelines, it can still be your ads, your messaging, your whatever, and you're just adding their logo and something about them to help get their brand out there as well. So not being threatened by it not just being your company that's on whatever it is we're talking about promotion-wise, That's a big step. And then really the vendors, they want you to use those co-op dollars. Like you said, they want you to use them. And it does take a lot of organization on the back end to make sure that you follow up on them, collect them, track them accordingly. But it really is worth it.
If there are people who are listening right now and saying, yes, here in 2023 and beyond, this is an opportunity that it's really low-hanging fruit. It's money that's there to help us increase our brand awareness. If they recognize this is a weakness, would you say, hey, there are some meaningful steps that would be putting first things first before even approaching a vendor about that, where you know there's money available? What might be those really first steps to say, you don't want to start on step 5. Here's step 1 and 2, just to get started if you know you need to improve?
Probably start with your top vendors, the ones that you have a good relationship with, you have a set budget from. So it's not, some of them, they give you a set budget, some is per ask. So start with the ones that give you a set budget. Talk to them about what other divisions do that is successful, and just start trying to do some of those activities within your existing marketing plans.
Yeah, I think that's smart, because that's the other one, is that we'll often talk to folks. What drives me crazy is when I'm talking to someone who has the title of a VP of sales and marketing, and they're like, yeah, I don't really know what it is. You got to ask for it. I'm like, my mantra. I've said it 1,000 times. Ask for what you want. Go to every one of these people and ask for what you want, right? And I'm like, you might just get it. The money is there. So it's not like you're asking for something crazy, but go and ask for that. And I think that just kind of starts that rolling. And that's, I think, an important thing too. It's like, what are the bright spots? And when I say that, it's like, what are you doing with other people that are similar to us that you love doing? And you say, this is really a win for us. And normally there's kind of a short list of things that really worked well. And normally one of those you guys can do as well. So I think there's some of those simple ones. What, with the relationship you have now, as you think about co-op dollars, are there things from an organization and planning and level of detail that they'll want to see in terms of when they'll be utilized and what you're doing? Or do the conversations stay relatively high level at this point with you guys?
We get pretty specific into our plans.
Okay.
Some of them give you more autonomy than others. Here's your budget, use it on whatever you want. And then others are like, we have to see the claim, we have to see the notarized invoice, and all these very specific. So you start to learn how they each handle it. But one of the most important things is just staying on top of it. So tracking the claims that you're sending, because they often require a lot of follow-up. And luckily I have a team member that helps me with this, because it is a lot to manage.
Yeah. One instance that happened is we have a client where they have a really strong relationship with one of their vendors, and vendors they say, we have this money, here's some ideas. And they're really thoughtful and helpful about how to use their money. But what happens is when you look at a lot of the ads and a lot of their messaging, they end up being about this, unsurprising, this product category, when in reality, if you look at their entire business, it's a very, very small percentage of their revenue and even a smaller percentage of their profits that it's driving. So how do you kind of balance that? So if someone's just looking through Instagram or meeting you guys in the store, basically experiencing your marketing, they're also getting an understanding of, they're not getting a distorted view of how important this one product is or how much your business is built around it.
That's a great question. I think you just always have to make sure that you keep the marketing initiative at hand. You keep it about your company and what you want to get out in front of the customers about you. You keep that front and center. And the vendor that is supporting it and the product that you're going to be plugging, that is secondary to it. And they're usually respectful of that. Like I said, they have their guidelines, and some of them make it sound like it has to be just vendor XYZ and talk all about us. But they'll work with you, especially if they know that you're being strategic about it. So don't always think it has to be a canned whatever they give you collateral wise. You can modify it and make it about you.
Yeah, I love that. And remember why they're making this money available to you in the first place. You're making a strong brand promise to the customer. You have a reputation in the community, right? You have top of mind awareness for whatever you're really focusing on. And if you get away from that, you are hurting yourself, which naturally is going to hurt them as well. So I think you're right. And sometimes they feel like, well, they're giving me this money. Obviously, I got to make it all about them. You're like, well, keep in mind why this relationship exists. So I think the way you phrase that and the way that you feel confident and direct about that, I think is just really important.
Yeah. And also another way to start using it and keeping it not just about a product is for events. You know, the vendors love to be a part of events because it gives them face time with your builders. So maybe try an event sponsorship, and that's going to help you with your costs there.
Yeah, I love that. I have a whole rant on this as well. Because many of our clients they'll sponsor a certain event, and over in the corner there'll be a table, and they dump all their stuff on there, and then everyone like just stays away from them. And I'm like, why are we making this distinction? Bring them in and make them feel part of it because they are, and let's just all just hang out together and talk. But like, let's not have the vendors all along the West Wing and all of us normal people who don't want to be sold to are in the middle. Like, let's bring it all together. So last question for you. Your husband is an entrepreneur. How do you guys interact? How often are you involved sharing your expert opinion on marketing? And how does that go over in the household, and how you guys work together to just help each other?
I often will give my opinion. It goes over best when he asks for it. So if I am, giving my opinion on something, and even though it may be a valuable opinion, if it's not the right time or he doesn't want to hear it, then I won't get very far by sharing it because it's just pointless. But overall, I think it's very helpful. We worked together in the past as well for a business he did before we came here, and I did some of the social media for him there.
Okay. Well, you've met my wife, who's our CFO, and it's not an uncommon question for people to ask my wife, so how do you work with this guy? Totally legitimate question. And in general, we've been doing it for obviously several years now. We've got it figured out, but that doesn't mean, this blurring of lines between personal and professional, and needing an outside perspective from someone I very much trust. Also being in a mindset to be willing to hear it and not be defensive. And she's like, you're being very defensive. I'm like, no, I'm not. This is how I am. This is what I do. She's like, no, it's not. And but I feel like just having someone you can trust who's an expert in marketing, which is just so critical in any business, would be really helpful. Yeah,
definitely. On the defensive front, I'll get that too often. And I'm not being defensive or, why do you sound so mad about it? I'm just very passionate about it. And so I get serious and a little bit animated, but it's passion. It's not defensiveness.
I will try to use that, or I can't figure out, actually, my wife might be listening to this and she might use that against me, but either way, I absolutely understand what you're saying. Well, Crystal, thank you very much. I've been really impressed with overall Instagram. I think your website is really well done. Where can people, they're listening to this, where can people find more about you, about Midcape, to maybe just learn a little bit more, to follow along and see some of the tactical and strategic things that you guys are doing?
I would definitely start with our social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram at Midcape HC, and Facebook. Those are the big ones that we focus on. I'd follow us there. Also, I feel it important to note that I do not run all of those by myself. I have a team, and I would not be able to do it without them. And then our website is midcape.com. You can find a lot about us there. And I'd start there.
Perfect. All right. Well, Crystal Pieschel, thank you very much. I know very well how busy you are, so I appreciate you making time. I've learned a lot from you, and thank you. Best of luck.
Thank you, Bradley.
All right then, friend, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Miss Crystal Pieschel. I would strongly recommend you follow Midcape on Instagram. I think they do a really nice job of blending insights and photos of people on their teams, as well as the communities, as well as their customers, the builders that they serve. As always, we want to make this the best podcast you listen to. So if you have suggestions for improvements or new topics or guests, do not hesitate to email me directly at bradley@bradleyhartmanandco.com. And if you got value from this episode with Crystal and I, please do me a small favor. Those reviews on Apple or Spotify or Stitcher or whatever the hell you're listening to us on, those mean more to us than you know. So please give us a quick review there. I will thank you for it. All right, my friends, that's all we've got. We are going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.
The sea was angry that day, my friends. Like an old man trying to send back soup in a deli. I got about 50 feet out, and suddenly, the great beast appeared before me. I tell you, he was 10 stories high if he was a foot. As if sensing my presence, he let out a great bellow. I said, "Easy, big fella." And then, as I watched him struggling, I realized that something was obstructing its breathing. From where I was standing, I could see directly into the eye of the great fish.
Mammal.
Whatever.
Hey, what did you do next?
Well, then, from out of nowhere, a huge tidal wave lifted me, tossed me like a cork, and I found myself right on top of him, face to face with the blowhole. I could barely see from the waves crashing down upon me, but I knew something was there. So I reached my hand in, felt around, and pulled out the obstruction.
What is that, a Titleist? A hole in one, huh?